Hello, and welcome to The Poor Generation, the show that inspires the present and future generations to take a deeper look at their lives, to see how their gifts and passions can be used to pour back into the world around them. I'm your host, Alex Pasley, and in today's episode, we will talk about the role of community in finding identity with our guest, Chase Snyder. We will discuss the roles of community in finding identity. If you are new to the podcast or tuning back in, I would like to thank you so much for stopping by. If you are enjoying the podcast, please do me a huge favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because the reviews help this podcast to grow and it helps to reach new listeners. Guys, I met Chase while I was in college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I had the privilege to work with him at Yoke Youth Ministries, and while working with him and his wife, I experienced his passion for teaching and serving in the community. Chase has a passion for spreading the gospel and helping others to understand God's word. And when Chase is not serving, you can find him camping or playing card games with his kids or drinking a lot of coffee. Man, I'm excited to get the opportunity to sit down with you and to get a better understanding about finding our identity in today's culture. So I know you are originally from Tennessee, so how did you end up in Atlanta?
Man, that's a cool story. I am a Southern boy through and through, which is easy to move from Tennessee to Atlanta. There's not much of a difference except for the traffic. And thankfully, I moved far enough outside of Atlanta to where I don't have to deal with any traffic each day. I live 2 miles from my office. It's a huge blessing, man. I do not have to sit in traffic, which we all hate. But I am a pastor and have had that call into ministry since I was 16 years old. And about 6 years ago, the church that I serve at currently was looking for a high school and young adult pastor. And I was at a church in Knoxville, had no resumes out to anybody. So, I mean, Annie and I, my wife, we were serving there and we're really just praying through what God would have for us and where he may want us to serve. If it was there, awesome. If it was somewhere else, would we be willing to take a step of faith and to step out in something? And we received a random Facebook message from who was the executive pastor here at that point and said, "Hey, I got your name from kind of a mutual guide ministry and wanted to know if you'd be interested in coming down here." And that started a conversation of us getting to know this community, getting to know the church, and seeing how God had a hand in us coming down here. So we took the step of faith out in 2017 and moved our family down here. We moved in between my wife's birthday and my son's birthday. So we were celebrating one birthday up there and having a birthday party once we moved down here in 2017. But it's been an incredible fit down here and cool to see how when you move from one location, people are different, but at the same time, man, people are the same. There's still the same hunger, the same drive, the same frustrations, and the same joys, no matter where you're at. So it's been cool to see that.
Yeah, I bet. So did your parents talk about purpose, or was that something that you had to discover on your own?
A little bit. My parents are incredible. So I'm the oldest of three. My parents were crazy. They had all three of us within 3 years. And so we were a very close-knit family. They joked, they were like, "Look, you guys were all in diapers at the same time. We taught you all how to drive a car at the same time. And then you guys all got out of the house at the same time," which I guess is a great perk of having all your kids at the same time. But they were instrumental to not only my upbringing, but just making sure that me, my brother, my sister, that we knew what the values in life were. It wasn't chasing money. It wasn't chasing the American dream. It wasn't trying to have prestige or any of those things. And so purpose, while it may not have been defined, it was always a conversation. Like, how are we making sure that we are doing what's most important? And man, that definition of purpose is, I mean, it's literally just why something exists. Like, and I know it's so foundational, but organizations often question or don't know or can't communicate why they exist. And individuals do the same thing. If you were to say, well, why do you exist? A lot of people would struggle with that. And so from an early age, for my parents and our family, we had this understanding of faith and this relationship with God. And we discovered that our purpose was designed and given to us by God himself. And even in that, a lot of people say, okay, well, if God created me, what is that special will, or what's God's will for my life that's individual? And I remember at 14, 15, 16, I was wrestling with some of that. I'll be honest, a lot of people think that I joke, but I really thought I was going to be a stuntman. Like I liked action movies when I was 14, 15. I'm so glad I didn't. Man, I would be like a glass man. My insurance would be through the roof. It would be absolutely terrible. But I remember through a lot of prayer, a lot of conversations with people I respected, people who were my peers, and then people who were older than me as well, trying to confirm, what is maybe something that I feel like I'm going to do in life. I feel like a lot of people confuse their job with their purpose. And what's real cool is when those align, but they don't always align. Look, sometimes you got to take a job because you need to feed your family. Sometimes take a job because you spent too much on Christmas and you need to pay off that credit card. And those aren't necessarily bad reasons, but when your purpose and your profession align, there's some real power in that. And so for me, it's always been this baseline. Purpose is important in your life. And really getting into upper high school, into college, really starting through scripture reading, prayer, and conversations with people I trusted, starting to discover how God had wired me and some of those passions and habits and abilities that he had given me in my life.
Okay. So did you ever struggle with trying to find a career path that aligned with your purpose?
That is an incredible question. And prior to 2017 of us moving down here at our current church, I wrestled with that a lot. So it would have only been 7 years ago or so. I remember feeling like I needed the understanding of, man, what is that thing that I'm going to do? Not a job, not a task, but what is that thing? Like, what is that mission? What is that purpose? And for me, I tend to be a jack of all trades. Look, I'm a redneck through and through, but I hide it well with fancy coffee and skinny jeans. And so I love reading. I have about 12 books surrounding me right now within arm's reach. But I also dropped a transmission into my car a couple years ago and put a new one in. And so I tend to be a jack of all trades. So for me, it's very difficult because I look at things and I'm like, oh man, I could take that job. I could do this. And some of it may just be naive arrogance, but I really feel like there are some interesting aspects that I look at everything. You look at something like education, or you look at different professions of marketing or this or that, and you're like, man, there would be some cool aspects to that. And I feel like I could maybe bring something to the table or learn something. But I really started through conversations, like I said, with people that I trusted that were close to me, really landed on a confirmation and a purpose for my life. And that purpose is simply stated for me as to help people understand and live out the Bible. And so once I really started to understand that is my purpose, to help people understand and live out the Bible, then certain jobs just weren't an option because I realized I wasn't going to be able to do that. Look, I'm not going to be a politician because they'd hate me because all I would be talking about is helping you understand the Bible and living it out. And that's not what a politician needs to do. I'm not going to do it. And there's nothing wrong with somebody who's a politician because they have a different purpose in their life. And so once I had that really helped bring some clarity because I stopped looking at everything as an option. And I started looking at my purpose, and I was like, okay, well, what aligns with my purpose? And even being in ministry, if you're a listener and you're familiar with the church, ministry is pretty wide open. There are tons of different types of nonprofits. There are nonprofits that help homeless people. They feed people who are in need. There are nonprofits that serve at camps and retreat centers or write curriculum and resources that advocate for people who don't have a voice. Even within a church, there's worship leaders. There are people who mobilize missions and help people cross-culturally. There are senior adult leaders, children's ministry, youth, all these different things. And for me, I was like, okay, this even brings some of those things down in ministry because if I'm not able to teach and to help people apply the Bible, then I'm not going to be a good fit because I learned that tick is in me. In some form or fashion, I've got to be able to do that because that's why I exist. That's my passion in life, and that's my purpose. So once I figured that out, like you're saying, there's some difficulty we see all of them as options. But once I narrowed out my purpose, then the picture became a little bit clearer as to where my profession and my purpose may be able to line up a little bit.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, what if a listener's thinking, man, I'm struggling to really understand myself because I know some listeners are struggling with identity. So, how do they get to know themselves and who they truly are in today's culture?
I would give two pretty practical encouragements to somebody who is trying to figure that out. And the first one would be, man, you got to talk to some people who know you best. You've got some blind spots. You don't know what's going on in your life, and you need to really figure out if from other people's perspective, like, hey, how am I wired? What do you see that I enjoy doing? What do you see that I hate doing? What do you think my gifts are, my talents are, all of those? And you may be surprised by some of the things that people tell you and some of the things that people say. But then I'm a big advocate on the second part on the other side of this is for you just to do stuff. Like go and do something. You may not know that you like something until you do it. And on the opposite side, you may not know that you hate something until you try to do something. Puzzles are a great example. A lot of people like puzzles in theory until you have 1,000 pieces sitting on your coffee table and you find out you hate this. Like what was supposed to be relaxing, stressful. And so if somebody's struggling with their identity, their purpose, their passion, I would encourage them to maybe take a step of faith and try something new, take an online course that's free, get involved in a group that is maybe centralized around an interest that you have. Look, if you like woodworking, go get some scrap lumber and try something. And you may find out you hate woodworking. But you might be surprised by some of the ways that you get clarity when you're asking other people what they see from their perspective that lights your fire or that just burns your anger at the same time, that could give you some clarity, and by just diving in and trying a few things.
Yeah, we definitely have to be open to trying new things. So, why do you think it's so important to have community? And when I say community, spiritual community.
I need a group of people that I trust. And I am a firm believer that everybody needs a group of people that they trust around them. I have a statement that I use frequently that is simply put as this: it takes multiple people to carry heavy things. And for some reason, when we're moving and we have a couch, I mean, we call all of our buddies up and we're going to buy them the cheapest pizza that we can find. And we're like, hey, I need some help. If you can help me move this couch, man, if you get a Friday open, and your friends know it, like they know you're moving, they try to avoid that text and that call. They don't want to come and help you. But we know if there's something heavy that we got to move, then we need multiple people to help carry that heavy thing. But that's also true in every other aspect of life. Big decisions, that's heavy. You need multiple people to help you carry that. Depression, anxiety, fears of inadequacy, conversations around passion or identity, trying to discern, is this the person I need to marry? Man, our life is full of stuff that is heavy and big. And it's not necessarily a bad heavy, it's just a big heavy. And we need multiple people to help carry that. And so that's one reason why community is so important. And another one is that I just have blind spots. Man, there's stuff that I do that I don't even know that I do, or there's ways that I come across. I don't even know that I'm coming across that way. And I need somebody who I trust, who's going to, from my perspective, speak biblical truth to me and say, look, man, when you said that, you were wrong. Or, hey, I know your heart. And when you said that, you didn't mean to come across this way, but this is how you came across, and can show me a blind spot that I have too. So they're going to be there to support me both with carrying something, but then they're also going to support me by hitting me upside the head when I need to be hit upside the head and be like, hey, you've got this that you need to deal with. Or I'm noticing these things in you, and that's different than your character and who you typically are. And so those are some big reasons why community is important for me and my wife and our family. And
Man, that is so true. So, I know our purpose of spreading the gospel is a focus of many sermons, but why do you think we don't spend as much time discussing our gifts and how God wants us to use them in this world?
I think it's because a lot of times it could just be easy to assume you know what your gift is. And in the church, it's so important to keep the mission in front of the people. That's so true. And mission and purpose are very similar. They both get to the question of why do we exist? Why do we exist? The mission is we exist as a group of people in this way. A purpose may be we exist as an individual for this way. Um, and it takes a lot of energy and effort. Look, this past Sunday, we were casting vision and mission for our church. And so we were talking at a very high level. Look, as a body of believers, we exist to glorify God by helping people become faithful followers of Jesus. And so we're trying to figure that out. But then you get into the nitty gritty where it takes relationship to help somebody discover their gifts. It takes familiarity to help somebody discover how they've been wired. And it takes a little bit of vulnerability also on the individual side. I've had conversations with some people who are almost fearful to know what their gifts are because then they know that they've got to step into something and maybe do something different. And so it's easier, more comfortable to do things out of negligence or, oh, I don't know. And you got an excuse. Hey, I don't know. I don't know what I should be doing. But that's why it's so important to walk alongside of people and to be able to call out the ways that they've been gifted and the ways that you can see the incredible skills and abilities and experiences that they have that can help other people. But it can be difficult because that means you got to know people. And a lot of people want to attend a big church because they don't have to be known. But that's not how the church was set up in the first century at all. That's not how God operates at all. There has to be relationship. And to be able to call out gifts, you got to be in proximity with people.
Amen to that. So I feel like purpose isn't even talked about in our upbringing or daily life anymore. I'm not even talking about at church or in the sermon, but I would be curious to know, do you feel like purpose is talked about in our culture today?
In general, with purpose, uh, I don't know. It goes kind of both ways. I feel like in schools we talk about purpose a lot because we're trying to prepare somebody for the future. But that, as I mentioned before, that kind of gets welded together with your profession.
Mm-hmm.
And culture will often do a bad job talking about purpose because we will equate it with following your heart, and we equate passions or desires with your purpose. So following your heart means you do what you want to do. Well, is that really why you exist? Is for you to do whatever you want to do. And for some people, they may believe that. And so that conversation of purpose stops there because as long as you're happy, as long as you're doing what you love, you're not hurting anybody, then all right, you go on existing and doing that thing. And so I think that from times purpose gets pushed down, and obviously I'm speaking from like a Western point of view on this too, because in Eastern cultures and even a lot of cultures and countries in the continent of Africa, South American, they're more communal and family oriented. And so your purpose in life is more closely tied to what your family's purpose in life is. And they may be having a lot more conversations about honor and how we fulfill things that the family needs. But in the West, especially in the United States, we're so individualistic that I think a lot of it gets equated to, well, just follow your heart, do what you want to do. And people chalk that up as their purpose. And so it leaves a lot of people thinking that their identity is wrapped up in their job or their identity is wrapped up in a relationship. If I don't have a relationship, who am I, or whatever that may be. And so I feel like those are some of the hindrances, is that we just become so driven by the things that we want to do, our desires, our passions, that people wake up and they're like, oh man, I thought I wanted to make a bunch of money, but I still feel like there's something else in life. Or I thought that this person was going to be it. And then that person's not there and they're like, wow, I wonder if there's something else in life. And so that conversation of passion and purpose may start to come back in once something's been taken away from somebody as well. So I feel like we don't do a great job talking about purpose because we just kind of equate it to following your heart. And no worse advice we can give people to just say, oh, follow your heart. Because who knows where your heart's going to go, man? Like your likes and dislikes change all the time. And if you don't believe that, then look back at pictures of your elementary haircut. Like your haircuts change. And man, it's hard to put your purpose in life in line with that too.
Oh, for sure. So A question just came to mind, and I want to make sure the listeners get a clear understanding. So, you talk about taking a leap of faith when you don't know what your purpose is, but you also say don't just follow your heart. So, what do you actually mean, and can you help the listeners know the difference between the two?
I would say when you get the advice, follow your heart. You're just chasing after the feeling that you have. And what I'm saying by take a step of faith would be more or less selecting an area of interest in something. And so if you're say if you're trying to figure out what your purpose is, and maybe you have a leaning towards technology, and you're like, well, I don't know what I want to do with technology. um, Taking a step of faith, maybe trying different things within that sphere so that you can figure out like, hey, am I going to use technology to help people? Am I going to use technology to make things more simple in the world? Am I going to use it to leverage this thing or that thing? Maybe I'm gifted. Maybe I have a purpose in something within that sphere. Like I'm a techie that's helping people. On the other side of follow your heart would be, well, you're just chasing whatever your feelings are. And if I don't feel good, then I'm going to leave that and go do something else. Man, knowing your purpose still means that your life may be difficult from times. And I would argue it's probably going to be difficult because you've got to stick to your guns. Following your heart doesn't often bring conviction. But when you're following and living in your purpose, then you're going to be living and operating with conviction. You're going to know, man, this is why I exist. And for me, knowing that I'm trying to help explain the Bible and help people live that out, for a lot of people, that's a very it's a very radical thing in their minds. They don't want to understand the Bible. They view the Bible as something that can mislead people, that it doesn't contain truth, that God is a figment of our imagination, or that Christians are dangerous and trying to oppress people. And so for me, I have to fall back on my convictions and be willing to step into maybe a difficult conversation with grace and with understanding and with love, but not compromise on my passion and my purpose too. Where if I was following my heart, I'd be like, man, that's difficult. Like, I'm not doing that. That doesn't make me feel good. I'm gonna go do something different. And so that'd be the difference, is not just following a feeling that may be fleeting that leads you this or there, but stepping into an area of interest to help discern a little bit of that.
Oh, for sure. Thank you for the explanation. That really helps to understand the difference between the two. So, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone trying to find their purpose?
I would say one practical thing you could do today is even to get a journal out and to write down some of the things you think you're talented at. Write down some of the things you like, some of the things you don't like. And if you're like, well, I don't even know what I like I mentioned, man, go do something. Just take a step in a direction. Because if you're honest with yourself, when you take that step, it's either going to be exhilarating and comfortable, like, oh man, like I enjoyed doing this. I felt alive. I felt like I was stepping into an area I'm gifted, or maybe an area that I've been created or purposed to step into. Or you're going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to be terrified. You're going to be frustrated. And you're going to be like, oh man, that was the worst thing ever. That's a lot of people's experience whenever they serve with kids. And there's a lot of people who want to teach in theory until they get into a kindergarten classroom all day with kids. Man, it takes a calling for you to be with a bunch of kindergartners all day. Those people are saints, man. You are outnumbered like 23-1 with screaming kindergartners. And if you're not purposed to do that, then it's going to be drudgery. But if you have a purpose, then man, you're going to find out. So I would write down, what are your likes, what are your dislikes, and take a direction somewhere. Take a step and evaluate it honestly. Be like, man, did this give me life? Was I excited, or did I dread it? Was I avoiding it? And that may help you start to figure out, like, okay, like my purpose may not be doing this thing, but where is my purpose? And you can pivot from it.
That's really good advice. But before we wrap up, I have two questions that I always ask my guests. Question one: who or what is pouring into you right now? And you can't say coffee.
Coffee is always pouring into me. Man, I have, like I mentioned, I have a small group. It's of 4 different couples, which include my wife and I. The cool thing that kind of worked out is that we all have 2 kids. My 2 kids are the oldest 2, so a lot of elementary age kids running around this house whenever we have it. So there's like 16 of us whenever we all get together. But they are continually pouring into us as a couple, as a family, and as individuals, just speaking truth, encouraging, being a sounding board. And so they are a huge help. I have for about the past 5 months, I've had a coach that has really been a coach slash counselor, so a professional counselor who has helped with some coaching as well. And I haven't been in a bad spot because there's always been a stigma around counseling and things, and I don't believe any of those are true because, like I said, you got to have help carrying heavy things. And so I knew that I was stepping into a bigger role in what I was doing, a different role here at our church. And quite frankly, I'd never held the weight of that role before. And so I was seeking out somebody who has held that weight, who wasn't from around here, that I could have honest dialogue with and could really help make sure that um, that my life was organized in the way that was going to be healthy, that my leadership would increase and be organized in a healthy way. And so his name is Robert. Shout out to Robert, who's been pouring into my life for the past 4 or 5 months.
Oh, that's awesome. So, question 2: what are you doing right now to pour into this world?
I am trying to live my life in such a way that there's no discrepancy with the things that I say and the actions that I take. That's one thing, because there are so many people who are trying to fake it until they make it, or they're trying to put the social media facade on something, and sooner or later those foundations crumble, dude. And we see it all the time. We see athletes, politicians, business leaders, pastors, teachers, whoever it is, in the news when it comes to light that their life isn't like they said it was. And then we're all shocked, like, oh my goodness, how can this exist? But that's a reality that all of us have to make sure that we're fighting against. And I do that by being open and honest with the people who are closest to me. I had a person tell me a long time ago, I wish it was my quote because it's an awesome quote. But the quote is simply that nothing good grows in the dark and nothing fruitful grows in the dark. Like if you're going to plant a fruit tree, man, that joker needs some sun. But think about what grows in a cave. It's mold, it's disease, it's bacteria. Like that's what grows in the dark. It's nothing that brings life. It's nothing that's fruitful. And so I'm trying to pour into the world by having other people pour into me, and me actually having my life and my words match up. Because if I'm a counterfeit or a fake, then that's not going to do anything positive. I'm pouring into my kids and my wife, and they are the first line of relationships. They're the first that I serve. They're the first that get my attention, and I haven't always been the best with them getting my best. And that's something I've been working on here recently, because I've come to the realization: look, if I suck at work, then that's one thing. But if I suck at the house, like they're not going to fire me and hire somebody new like that. That's going to stick with them forever. And not that I'm advocating you being a terrible employee, but you're not going to be a good employee if everything's terrible at home, or if your closest friendships are failing, or the relationships that you have dear aren't as dear because you're prioritizing something else. So I'm pouring into my family. I'm pouring into our staff here at our church. I believe that the best organizations, the best churches in my line of work are those that are full of the best staff, who have clarity of their role, who have resources. They're not afraid to fail. They feel like they're supported. And so I'm trying to lead with that and to pour to them so that they in turn can pour into other people in that same vein. So for me, it's a lot of relationships, having a lot of conversations, being real with a lot of people, and being able to have a lot of people be real with me. So if I'm willing to speak truth, man, they got to be willing to speak truth, and I have to be willing to receive truth too. So those be the people right now that I'm pouring into.
Man, that is awesome. Keep up the great work. So, can you let the listeners know where they can follow you and where they can check out your website?
Yeah, my socials across most of the platforms, I believe, but at least the big ones. Man, there's so many stinking social media platforms out there. I got to make sure I have all of them, even if I don't use it. Look, if you go to one of them and I don't use it, I don't use it. But the ones that I'm on all the time are Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, the old ones because I am a millennial. But it's simply Chase Snyder 12. So that's the handle if you go to any of those. And then my website is chasesnyder.blog. And I do have articles. I have links to resources, a few books that I've written, sermons, teachings that I have. They're all linked from our church, and podcasts that I do that are really just trying to take a look at life and scripture and faith, and not have a cliche faith, or definitely not have a faith that we proclaim, but we don't actually live out. So those are all the places. Chase Snyder 12 on socials and chasesnyder.blog online.
Oh, cool. Thank you again for sitting down with us today on The Poor Generation.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Oh, for sure. This was such a great conversation and a good reminder about the importance of community. Listeners, I have 3 key takeaways I want to leave you with today. The first key takeaway is, if you're struggling to find your purpose, take a leap of faith and try something new, like an online course that is free, or get involved with a group that is centered around a topic or a theme that you're interested in. The second key takeaway is, it is important that we are in a small group because we need people speaking biblical truth in our lives, and we need people helping us carry loads during difficult seasons in our lives. The third key takeaway is, if you're struggling with identity and don't really know where to start, take time to journal and write down things that you like and dislike. I also want you to know that God would love to be on this journey with you and to reveal what your gifts and talents are, because He loves you and He cares about you. In closing, I want to share some helpful resources. Chase reminds us that it's so important to have community. We need positive people in our life that are going to uplift us and hold us accountable. Also, go check out Chase's book, a 5-week devotional to help you apply the Bible to your life. The book will be in the podcast description. If you are still listening, I want to give you a huge thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. Please follow us on Instagram, The Poor Generation. I would love to hear about your life stories. And if you have any questions or book recommendations, please reach out to me. My email address is in the podcast description on all platforms. Also, please do me a huge favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and download the episode. The reviews and the downloads help this podcast to grow, and it helps to reach new listeners. I want to end the show by saying that you are loved and that you do have a purpose. You do have unique gifts and talents to offer this world. I love you, and I will see you in the next episode.